Hey, how are you guys doing? I thought it might be nice to start this episode off with a bit of box breathing. This is done in 4 steps. You're going to inhale for 4 seconds through your nose, hold your breath for 4 seconds, exhale through your mouth for 4 seconds, and then hold your breath for 4 seconds. We'll do it twice, and then I'll get right into the episode. So just listen to the directions that I give with your mouth closed. Start inhaling through your nose. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. Slowly exhale through your mouth. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold your breath. 2, 3, 4. Let's do that one more time. Inhale through nose, hold breath. Exhale through mouth, hold breath. Inhale, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 2, 3, 4. And hold, 2, 3, 4. Now let me ask you something. What do you value most in your life right now? Really think about this for a second. Now, what would happen if that thing, whether it's a person, your job, or even an ideal, was taken away from you? We've all experienced that feeling of loss, right? And sometimes it's when those things we hold the highest slip away that we realize just how much value we've placed on them. In the last episode, we dove into the gray area between selfishness and selflessness. Today, we're going to take that conversation a step further and talk about idolatry, about the things and people we place our value on and how that shapes us. It's not just about religion. It's about how we navigate our worth through what we idolize. So let's begin. When most people hear the word idolatry, they probably think of religion. Worshipping false gods or bowing down to golden statues. But in this conversation, I want to stretch that definition a bit. You see, to me, idolatry is when we place something or someone so high above everything else that it becomes the central force in our lives. You see, idolatry isn't about valuing things. It's about valuing them to the point where they define us. When we let something become more important than our own sense of self-worth, or when we start to build our identity around something external, that's where the problem lies. Think about it for a second. Have you ever placed someone, maybe a partner, a friend, or even a celebrity, on a pedestal? Ever treated an ideal like success or perfection, like it's the ultimate measure of your value? That's what I'm talking about. It's not wrong to value people or things. It's about how much power you give them over who you are. This is more than just a theory. A study by Toska in 2021 found that when we place someone on a pedestal, the emotional toll can be immense. You see, we often create unrealistic expectations, which ultimately lead to emotional disillusionment and erosion of self-worth. In fact, idolizing others often leaves us feeling empty once the pedestal they've been placed on crumbles. Think about an artist that you loved so dearly who then becomes faced with a scandal. They become a victim of cancel culture, and it kind of shakes your feelings a bit. You start to think and feel weird about all of the great feelings you had by listening to their music or consuming their art. You start to question that artist's integrity because of their failures. When idolatry becomes a center practice in our lives, our worldviews become shaken and rattled, and we're left almost existential when those people or ideologies crumble. We become aimless, depressed, hopeless, wondering what we're doing with life or what there is to do in life. So, why do we idolize? Well, first off, it's human nature. We want validation, right? We want to feel seen, we want to feel heard, and we want to be valued. Yet the world around us makes it so easy to look outside of ourselves for that affirmation rather than realizing that by simply being alive, we are intrinsically priceless. It could be a lover's praise, a social media like or following, or a career recognition. We place our worth in the hands of others without even realizing it. Think about a time you felt insecure. Maybe you looked to someone, your partner, a mentor, or even a public figure to make you feel like yourself again. See, that's idolatry in action. It's the need to feel like we matter, like we belong. But the issue arises when we make this external validation the foundation of our identity. We start to believe that if we don't have their approval, if others don't recognize our ideals, our definitions, then we must not matter at all. Also, let's not forget about cultural influences, right? The world constantly pushes this idea that you must subscribe to this ideology, that you must subscribe to this worldview, like success or beauty or fame, in order to become meaningful. We're told these things are worth idolizing, and before we know it, we buy into that narrative. It's all around us. Consider this study by Twinge et al. In 2019. The role of social media in fueling this desire for external validation can't be ignored. The rise of individualistic values in younger generations, combined with obsession over self image, has led to an increased focus on validation from others. It's no wonder we're seeing higher rates of anxiety and depression in millennial and Gen Z populations. When your value is constantly tied to outside opinions, it creates a fragile sense of self worth. One of the best examples I think we have in our current Western capitalistic society for idolization is plainly seen through sexuality. Think about it. In today's world, sexuality can become the centerpiece of how we define ourselves. It's the all or nothing hill in which we find our ultimate purpose. It's so much more than just desire. It becomes a measure of worth, an expression of identity that's often seen as central to who we are. People are often judged based on their sexual identity, whether it's their orientation, their sexual appeal, or how open they are. We see this everywhere on social media, in advertising, in relationships. Sexuality becomes an idol when it starts to take the place of something more foundational like emotional intelligence, spiritual growth, or self awareness. You see, we begin to place more value on how we're perceived sexually than on the whole of who we are. And when we make sexuality our defining feature, I believe we reduce ourselves to a performance. I think we see this best in cultures where desire and attraction are commodified, like in celebrity culture or social media. What happens when this idol fails us? When we no longer feel validated by our sexual identity, or when it no longer fits how we want to be seen? Well, we're left feeling lost. Sexuality is just one example, but it's important to see how idols like this can distort our sense of self and influence how we relate to others. But let's zoom out a bit and think about this in the broader context of things. Another huge factor in this conversation is what I love to call hyper-individualism and consumerism. If you followed me on Instagram for quite a while, you will know that I am very, very outspoken against hyper-individualism and consumerism. I believe ultimately that these two things will be the downfall of Western society because we've abandoned the power of community, become so inwardly focused at the expense of community, that we've made everyone our enemy, that we've been sucked into binary thinking, sucked into the polarity, and have forgotten completely how community has evolved with us throughout the centuries for human flourishing. Both hyper-individualism and consumerism encourage us to treat identity, value, and even relationships as commodities. In this culture, we're told to constantly stand out, to be our best selves, to risk idolizing individual achievement and personal branding over collective growth and community. Take consumerism, for instance. We're constantly sold the idea that having more, whether it's material goods, experiences, or status, makes us more valuable. And this mindset seeps into our self-worth. We start to measure ourselves based on what we consume and what we can show to the world. Success becomes the idol, and we chase it by accumulating things like experiences and social validation rather than seeking fulfillment or peace within ourselves. Hyper-individualism then takes this even further. It promotes the idea that we should exist for ourselves alone, constantly chasing personal success, regardless of the consequences for those around us. Our partners then begin to exist for our pleasure and our purpose. Our families begin to exist for our pleasure and purpose. Our jobs become a mean to achieve more material, more experiences, better status in society. In this framework, we begin to view others not as people, but as tools for personal gain, which in turn breeds competition. It breeds isolation and unhealthy comparisons. It's an ideology that teaches us to look inward to the detriment of the collective well-being. Research by the American Psychological Association in 2020 points out that hyper-individualism and consumerism are major contributors to higher stress levels and diminished community engagement. These societal forces drive people to focus on individual achievement at the expense of deeper, meaningful connections. Essentially, when we idolize success and consumption, we become isolated and disconnected from those around us. We start to feel lonely even though we have friends. We start to feel lonely even though we have relationships. We start to feel lonely even though we have jobs. We find it hard to isolate with each other because everybody seems to be doing well or accomplished or better than us, because everybody only presents the best version of themselves, whether online or in person. We become too afraid to share our weaknesses, too afraid to share our fears, because we think that we'll only be judged by each other, that we won't be worth having around. You see, when we place so much importance on external validation, whether that's through sexuality, status, or personal achievement, we risk becoming disconnected from the things that truly matter. We become fragile. Our identity is no longer ours. It's shaped by external factors and often by the idolization of things that don't serve us. Oh, well, this relationship doesn't serve me anymore. They don't understand where I'm coming from. They're not hearing what I'm saying. Oh, they just criticized me. They must hate me. They must be my enemy. Therefore, I must cut them out. We become a type of people who can no longer take any form of criticism. We don't believe that the most fulfilling relationships in this life are those that actually challenge us, that show us our blind spots. And this doesn't just affect us as individuals. It ripples into our communities. When we idolize personal success or individualism, we lose sight of how we can work together to support each other and to grow as a collective. You see, communities built on idols like consumerism or hyper-individualism will ultimately end up fractured. People will be competing against each other for recognition rather than collaborating for mutual benefit. The APA's 2020 report ties hyper-individualism to increased anxiety and diminished community participation, showing how these ideologies contribute to a growing sense of isolation and competition rather than collaboration and support. So now that we've talked about idolatry, let's turn the mirror on ourselves. Ask yourself, what do I value most? Not just in your head, but really think about it. What's at the center of my life? What do I hold on to so tightly that if it were to be gone, if it were to be invalidated, I would lose my mind. I would be incomplete. I would be directionless. Can you say you value yourself and the inner peace that comes from knowing your worth doesn't depend on what anyone else thinks or expects of you? Take a moment here and ask, what if all things I value most were taken away? Would I still know who I am? I had invested so much into my first marriage by placing my spouse on such a high pedestal because they were so much more disciplined than me, so much more calm than me, so much more externally righteous than I was. I placed them so high on a pedestal that every time I made a mistake, I felt imprisoned in shame for hours and often for an entire day. This continued on for 5 years to the point where I no longer confided in my partner the things that I was struggling with so deeply because I feared that those struggles, those fears, those insecurities would cause them to leave me. Ironically, what it actually ended up doing was cause me to look into unhealthy ways of coping with these feelings. I started to garner addictions and put myself in places I should have never been in, all for the sake of preserving the marriage I was in and coming off as healthy or much better than when I was. And when all of that came crashing down and was exposed, well, my partner decided to divorce because they were completely shocked by all of these secrets that I was harboring. They didn't know who they were married to. And so the choice became really easy for them. I lost everything, not just my marriage, but all of my friends, everybody in my life, my career, everything. Everybody was completely shocked by the things that I was harboring in secret. I had placed so many things on such a high pedestal and created this false ideal, false image that I myself had to uphold in order for me to see myself as worthy, as important. I lost real, true, honest community because I was too afraid to go outside of myself for help. You see, in healthy communities, we're supposed to lift each other up based on the fullness of our beings, not on how we look, not on how much we achieve or what we can buy or what we struggle with or the fears we hold or the doubts we have. No, true community thrives when we see each other for who we really are, in our flaws, in our complexities, in our passions, and yes, in our sexuality. It's about connection, not idolization. We're able to turn to one another and say, hey, I've noticed that the way you've been speaking, or I've noticed some of your viewpoints, I don't know, something isn't sitting right with me. And I just want to know where that's coming from. I just want to pick your brain a little bit more and hear your reasoning. And ideally, if you're on the receiving end of that, instead of reacting in defense or trying to justify all of these things by claiming, well, maybe you're just the problem. Well, how dare you question this, and that? Instead, you have earnest conversation. You avoid miscommunication by communicating. In doing so, you set aside your pride, you admit you're not perfect, and maybe you can be wrong sometimes. There's nothing wrong with that. There should be no shame accompanied with that. Because in a collective, everybody understands that nobody is perfect. But together, we can become this force of reconciliation, this force of healing, this force of flourishing. because ultimately we want what's best for each other. See, the truth is, releasing idols is uncomfortable. It forces us to face the truth that our worth isn't tied to external things. But when we do release these idols, we make space for something much more powerful. I think that's authentic self-worth. When we make space for that in ourselves, we make room for a stronger, more supportive community. Because a healthy community isn't built on the worship of a few, it's built on the recognition of the inherent value in all its members. No one is less than. We are all equal, regardless of our social status, ethnic background, gender expression, whatever. We're equal. So, in our next episode, we're going to dive deeper into the hidden costs of idolizing. We'll talk about what happens when your idol falls and how you can rebuild after that sense of loss. Because truth is, growth comes from releasing the need to idolize and to start focus on what's truly yours, what's truly real. So I'll leave you with this thought. When you place your value on someone or something outside of yourself, you risk losing sight of your own worth. So I ask you, what would happen if you let go of the need to idolize and focused on what's truly yours? I hope you'll carry that question with you. And until next time, keep reflecting, keep evolving.